Hello, everybody. This is Hugh Massie, the CEO and founder of DNA Behavior. And today I'm delighted to be doing another one of our identity EQ interviews. And I have the great pleasure to have with me Bill Trigleth from Canon Financial. And Bill is the Executive Director of Certifications. Canon is a leading financial services training provider. It's a company that's been around for a long time. Bill's worked with them for 24 years. He's a fabulous innovator, has brought a lot of depth to their training programs, ensuring the highest levels of quality control. And I've had the fortune to benefit from Bill's ideas, thinking, encouragement for the last 10 years or so. So, Bill, it's great to spend some time with you today. And
thank you, Hugh. Good to be with you.
Yeah, this will be fun. I always enjoy finding out something different about a person I didn't know before. Something always jumps out. So we'll see what surprises I get today. But maybe, Bill, if we just start with you telling us a little bit about your life and your journey into the financial services industry and your long career with Canon.
Well, I started in 1978 in the financial services business as an advisor, and the Dow was about 1,000. So it feels like it was ages ago that I started my career. From moving from an advisor, I went from a brokerage firm to a bank that was just getting into the business of starting retail securities offers. And as I went through that experience to help them build out their offices across the state of Georgia, basically, they ended up moving me to Tennessee to run their trust department and the SunTrust Securities at the time, which was the brokerage group that I was with. And then I moved up into the holding company. And as I was doing all of that, I needed training. And so I was connected with the people at Canon. And lo and behold, we hit it off and they invited me to come to work for them. And I've been here now, like you said, 24 years. So it's been a good part of my life. And while here, I've done several really interesting things. I've worked with our clients specifically in the areas of trying to create performance improvement solutions, helping people think through what are the root causes of the challenges that they're faced with, and then not address the right way to say it is not address the symptoms, but actually address the root causes. And that's really been rewarding. And lately, of course, with all the change that's happened in financial services industry, we've been having to think about how do we respond to all the change that's taken place. And so there have been some really interesting changes that I've had to make in terms of understanding and bringing new ways to think about those challenges to the marketplace. So we might get into that a little bit later on.
Well, yeah, because it's not just thinking about the challenges of your clients, but it's also the challenges of your firm as well.
Certainly, we've seen a lot of change take place in the training and performance improvement space. You think about how heavily reliant people were on live classroom training, and now everything's moved to online. Just about everything in every aspect of business has had to move that way. And so there's lots of changes that are occurring, and there's new things that we're discovering all the time. To think in different ways. And my journey to learn about behavioral economics and behavioral advice and emotional intelligence has really served me pretty well. It's quite an interesting, to me anyway, journey to reach sort of an understanding of what it takes to pull all of that together, and then how you knit that within the industry and its challenges, our own company and its challenges, relationships. All of that has a big impact on what we're going to be able to do, going forward. And your products and services, financial DNA and business DNA, are really important, and they occupy a really important place to help advisors and leaders in all kinds of businesses just get to a place where they're making much more knowledgeable decisions about the people that they hire and the relationships they're trying to promote and engage in. And it's probably the best way I can describe it is it's an old but very important new skill set that has to be developed by a lot of people because they haven't traditionally paid attention to it. They paid more attention to the technical aspects of work or operational aspects of work, and not the more human and human relationship aspects of the work. And that certainly drivers for CEOs and a lot of the current research that's being done right now. And you see, you really see in the hiring process now, people thinking about for leadership positions, not just IQ, but EQ as well.
Yeah.
Because EQ obviously can be learned and it can be manipulated and it can be grown, and you can grow in terms of EQ, whereas IQ is pretty much just innate. You have the IQ that you have.
Yes, so Bill, what would you say has been a pivotal moment in your career that, clearly you're seeing behavior as being important, the development of people being important. It's not just about the numbers anymore, but, even just for your own career, what generally speaking, what do you see as a pivotal moment that has shaped your direction now?
Well, I've had a lot of pivotal moments in my life. I grew up on a cattle ranch, and moving into financial services was a really big leap, as you might suspect. And it just feels like my life is just one leap after another because, there's so much to know and there's so much to learn. And if you're committed to being curious and not being a learned person, but a learning person, there's always something that pops up. So your question is kind of interesting because there was a pivotal moment that took place in my life, but then there have been lots of other things that sort of have built on each other to get me to the place where I'm at. So I guess I was around probably, 48 years old. I'm working at Canon and I'm at an advisor conference, and this fellow named Dr. Harold Langlois is doing a presentation on relationships, especially between advisors and clients. And at the end of that, I was just so intrigued by that. I figured, I see him being somebody that could really help Canon in this area. So I tried to go up in recruiting, and that didn't work out so good. He was a professor at Harvard, so he wasn't really interested in working in this space. But we hit it off really well. And he has just become a friend and a mentor to me. And he's challenged me on pretty much everything that I think about. And he helped me come up with some mental frameworks to understand the world a lot differently than I had before I met him. And part of that is in the area of emotional intelligence and neuroscience and how the brain works and how relationships occur. And a lot of other disciplines. But he sort of taught me basically to just understand that the brain sort of likes to work in three ways. It wants three things. It doesn't want to know. It sort of wants to. It does want to know. It doesn't really want to learn, and it wants to be efficient and survive. And those things lead it to want to run cool and efficient, right? So it wants to survive. It wants to know, not learn, and it wants to run cool and efficient. And when you think about the brain operating in that way, and you add in the understanding of the emotional components of fight or flight, it helps you really understand lots of different drivers of behavior and motivations of people, and how fear gets in the way of people's success, and how it also drives people to do good things and bad things from a behavior standpoint. And it really influences the behaviors, and the ability to understand what those are through valid assessments like what financial DNA and behavior DNA, business DNA provide is really, really important. He got me thinking in lots of really interesting ways. So I started doing some research. I read General Lehrer's book on how we decide, and that got me started to understand that a lot of the decisions that we make that drive our behaviors are pretty much done in the subconscious. And there isn't any language for that, right? It's really only feelings. So that led me to, some neuroscience exploration. And Dr. Scott Page at Michigan State University, he had a course on model thinking. And I used that model thinking course to start understanding how to create frameworks to view the world and understand the world. And obviously, I've used some of that to understand emotional intelligence and the drivers of behavior. And that got me reading a little bit about Charlie Munger. I'm sure you know Charlie's name, and he's a hero of mine. But my personal guide really in the model thinking area is a fellow named Shane Parrish, and he runs the Farnham Street website. He sort of leads the Knowledge Project, which is dedicated to helping you master the best of what other people have already figured out, if that makes sense. And Ben Franklin said the biggest waste that people can make is trying to learn something somebody already knows. Just go and ask them. So there's some efficiency there. That led me to a really interesting exploration of complexity theory and Dave Snowden's work with Cognitive Edge. Dave's a really deep thinker, and he created the Canavan model, which is about different states of change that occur. So as you think about complexity and the emergence activities that happen in relationship to different systems working together, bumping into each other, merging and unmerging, there's a lot of that's applied to both the tangible and the intangible. Relationships are very much like that, as well as systems like companies and organizations. So if you think about people that have gone down the road of systems thinking, where you've got the ability to know the unknowns, figure them out. So a system generally is applied to mechanical systems. They think about identifying root causes so they can understand what intervention they need to make to create a change that's going to generate an outcome they're looking for. But Dave Snowden's view about this, especially for people and culture and relationships, is that in the complexity theory world that he operates, the unknowns are never knowable, right? Because you're in a complex or a chaotic state. And so it's only by doing dispositional interventions as opposed to causal interventions that you're going to be able to generate some change in the culture or the relationship. And you can't know the outcome of that until you do it. So from a leadership standpoint, understanding the difference between working in a state that's complicated, but where you can understand what needs to be done, even if you have to bring in experts, versus working in a complex or creative or chaotic state where the unknowns can't really be known. You just have to do some things and see what happens. And that exists both in relationships as well as systems like economic systems or ecosystems, if you will. I think understanding that has helped me appreciate your relationship with me and your company and what it's trying to deliver to the industry and to the world. You introduced me really to the importance of understanding emotional intelligence and behavioral advice way before Richard Thaler won his 2017 Nobel Prize. They probably should have given it to you instead of to him. And, my apologies, obviously, to Daniel Kahneman, who sort of started this whole thing in 2002. But But that work that he did and the work that you did happened kind of simultaneously with another relationship I had with Carl Kuhnert, who was the head of the psychology department at Georgia. You got to meet him and work with him. And you guys really helped shape me to understand sort of the 5 levels of emotional development and maturity, and recognize that there are some very specific coaching techniques that really have to be employed to be an effective coach, whether you're doing that as a leader or a friend or in a formal relationship as a coach. And that you can't help somebody get to the next level of their emotional maturity unless the coach has actually already made that trip as well, which I think is really important, because that leads us back to, in financial services, you have a lot of financial advisors that do sort of what I call pseudo coaching. And pseudo coaching can be really, really harmful. I think you'd agree that without a really valid behavioral assessment to understand somebody's drivers of their behavior and their biases, pseudo coaches really aren't much better than getting advice from a bartender, because they're just throwing stuff off the top of their head too. So
a lot of the time they're guessing, I think, without using some kind of instrument or tool or structure to get below the surface to perhaps what's not being seen. But Bill, I want to come back to something you said at the start that started really this very deep journey.
Yes.
Extensive journey of exploration. But when you were at the conference, many years ago, when you were 48 years old, and I'm not meaning to say you're old, but some years ago you were at the conference.
Yes, I'm in my 60s.
Yeah, and so let's just say it's 15 years ago. You're at the conference and you listen to the Harvard professor talk about relationships, human behavior. It triggered something very deep in you that was unknown to you at that time. And I suppose my question is what was going on inside you at that time that caused that trigger? Because your amygdala went off.
Yes.
And that took you on a journey. It's like I went on the journey I'm on to some degree because somebody asked me one day what I was passionate about, and I wanted to, help people all over the world become financially self-empowered. But when I thought about it more and looked at what I'd been doing, this journey of human behavior had already well and truly started. I just didn't know it had.
Mm-hmm.
It was one instance though that brought it all to the surface, to be honest. So I'm just interested. Have you pinpointed that? Because human behavior is very deep for you.
Yeah. Yes. When I think about that experience that I had with Harold, and then I'm fortunate enough to get to talk to him often, and he never lets up pushing me in terms of asking me to think critically about the concepts and the sense making that I employ in trying to understand the world. And I don't know, something just struck me about his presentation that forced me to want to know more. Now, you've seen my profile, the DNA profile. So I'm an initiator, and I'm just naturally curious about things. But what really was going on probably at the time was I was trying to knit together an understanding of what he was saying about relationships and how people relate to each other, and the types of personalities that are out there that make really good clients for advisors.
Yeah.
And to help advisors recognize that there are some people that it doesn't matter what you do, you're just never going to be able to please them. So if that's the situation, you have the choice to decide, do you want to work with that person or do you not want to work with that person? And when you think 20 years ago in the business, most advisors were really focused on capturing new clients, and they weren't thinking about capturing the right new clients. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's what you're saying is, at the end of the day, is you want to capture the right clients, and the human being has, which is the advisor, just has to accept that they aren't going to connect with everybody, and they're not going to win everybody over. They're not going to build that deeper level of trust with people. So at some point, you don't overwork at that or stress about it, because the pond is big enough, and you'll find others that you can build those trusted relationships with, because there are just some people in the world where, because of who we are, we're just not going to build the deep enough level of trust to move forward. Sometimes, in a way, this is when I think advisors use chemistry. The better advisors use that word chemistry when they're saying, who's my ideal client? I mean, there are some values and there's some other filters, but chemistry is a very important thing. And it's, in a way, what you're saying is it's unexplainable.
Very, 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 very much so. You could also transition that to being a leader and also being a coach, whether you're being leaderful for your client, or you're actually trying to coach them, or you're actually a coach or a mentor as it relates to someone in any business. The understanding of the motivators of people is really important. The understanding of how they're going to react in stressful situations is really critical. And not having had that insight until much later in my life, I can look back and see, as an advisor, when I was an advisor, how I missed so many opportunities to build really great relationships with people instead of being so transaction focused. When I was a manager, I recognized that because I didn't have the skill sets of coaching, right? There are certain techniques that coaches use, trained in executive coaching programs, that if you base those on an understanding of the individual you're working with, and by that I mean you've got a valid assessment to understand what those behavioral drivers are, you can be really effective and help people. And that gets back to that 5 levels of emotional maturity. Probably I didn't reach the level that I operate, at least I think I operate in most of the time now, which is level 3, where I'm looking for ways to find a win for you and for me.
Yeah.
That I could have been so much more effective as a coach and helpful for that person, as opposed to thinking about, well, that's part of my job. I'm supposed to be coaching, so let me get in there and give you some platitudes. It was really bad, and I feel bad for the people that had to experience that. I could be more helpful now. Unfortunately, those times have passed. But that also has helped me recognize that there are some things that I can do to help promote the understanding of this, and that it can be done at a much earlier age than most people think about.
Yeah.
I'm on the board of directors at my daughter's school that she went to. And as a member of that, I have certain capabilities to influence the direction that the school is going. And I've really promoted a formal program around emotional intelligence and understanding behavioral biases. And it's fascinating to see the programs that are available that actually start in kindergarten to help the youngest of us just develop a language about our feelings, and how empowering that is for them when they're not frustrated having a feeling that they can't put a label on, so they can't express it. But once they're able to do that, it really helps open up the conversation, and it opens up their understanding, and it helps them recognize and sort of take responsibility as they go through this program of whatever relationship I have with somebody, I'm 50% responsible for it. Yep. Whatever it is, good or bad, I have just as much responsibility for how that relationship is operating as the other person. And recognizing the differences in the way that people's brains are wired and how they're just naturally, from an innate standpoint, going to be thinking as it relates to their orientation to how they see themselves working in the world and what's right and wrong based on their sense-making capabilities. Once you're able to recognize that that's just the way they are and the place that they are in life, it allows you to be a lot more tolerant, right, to other people. And tolerance is where you find the ability to evaluate and recognize where there's common ground. And it's that commonality that lets people sort of build relationships and build solutions and find ways to move forward. And unfortunately, in today's society, we've got this polarization going on, and the tolerance for other people's views, it's kind of scary to think about where today's society is headed with the terms like woke and the cancel, the cancel group. I mean, it's interesting from an academic standpoint if you want to sort of evaluate and look at it, but it's something we're living every day. And so sharing an understanding of how to sort of move through that, I think, is important for those of us that do understand that and do believe that that's important to do, to get out there and promote that. So that's one of the reasons why I'm promoting that at the school. But I'm being a little self-serving too, because I'd love for our students to be ultra competitive with everybody else that's out there. And obviously, if you know that a success factor that's highly sought after is someone with a high level of emotional intelligence and the ability to work with others, if that gives them a competitive advantage, then I'd like for our students to have that. So
I think there's nothing wrong with the school being branded as the developer of high EQ kids that come into the community. You know, a lot of the time schools celebrate sporting success and academic success, but we know EQ is the differentiator. The rest of the sporting capabilities and the academic capabilities are somewhat a given.
Well, I love the fact that you use the word differentiator, because that's true for just about everyone, whether they're a student trying to get into a great university, or they're a graduate trying to get a great job, or there's someone that's like an advisor who's trying to establish sort of a better presence in the marketplace, or they're a leader of a company. You know, differentiation is the driver of growth. And if you can do things better than your competition, you construct solutions that more accurately address the needs of your customers, and you find ways to add different value elements to what you're offering over and above the competition, those differentiators is what sets you apart and allows you to have that growth. And that's important. And for advisors, one of the best differentiators is the ability to have a really powerful relationship with the customers that they're serving. And that comes from an understanding of, how can I help you find things that are important to you? What are those aspirations that you have? And then as the chaotic environment around us, the world that we live in, happens to us, as life events sort of trigger things that we have no control over, all we can do is respond to those. If I can help you make the better choice of all of your options, then you have a much better chance of having a great outcome later in life, short term, whatever time frame you want to apply to it. And that's the value that the advisor brings to the client today. It's not the answer to a technical question. Financial planning software does all of that. That's not nearly as important as helping people to think through what's important to them and what aspirations do they have and what are the choices that can be made to reach those. And as life happens to us, how can we get derailed because of our natural reaction as a response to those trigger points? And if they're committed to a goal or to a specific view of what the future they want to see happen for them and their family, if the advisor can help be there to take them through that life event, think about the consequences of that, prioritize or reprioritize those goals so that they reach their aspirations, that's value. That's what clients are going to see as valuable. That's what they'll pay for, because they don't have to pay for asset allocation strategies and investment management anymore. I mean, that's just free.
So at the end of the day, though, Bill, for an advisor to be successful, they have to be emotionally intelligent. It's like a leader has to be emotionally intelligent. And to me, the holy grail for leaders is being able to understand differences. We're very big these days on talking about strengths, capitalizing on strengths. Even the book I've just written last year with Lee Ellis, my mentor in all of this,
right,
talks about capitalizing on strengths. But I keep emphasizing to Lee and to everybody out there that the difference between success and failure as a leader is in the EQ area, which really comes down to managing differences. If you can't manage the differences, and that plays into customization, which I know is another big topic that we could, if we had time, we would mine into here. But I think that your passion in unlocking human behavior, bringing that to advisors, is really around the development of emotional intelligence. The advisor needs to be able to manage differences, whether it's between a husband and wife, different client groups, even see the differences between the clients they're attracted to or not attracted to. It's in every setting, and you've seen it for your daughter's school, and really that would be true for lots of schools. How can we have more emotionally intelligent kids? This is a very important area, and what, in a way, the DNA behavior systems have done, which maybe Richard Thaler and Kahneman haven't done in the same way, is we've made the behavioral finance, the behavioral economics, dealing with behavioral talents practical.
Yes.
In that way, to see the differences. We don't have to go in there and, they scientifically are proven and show you, but in a way you don't have to go and worry about finding why somebody is the way they are. They are the way they are. But it pieces that together, and I think that for our listeners, you mentioned before that you're an initiator, but you're more than that in the sense that you're also extremely innovative and a very deep thinker, very reflective person. Your own amygdala was challenged 15 years ago, and you've gone and thought about this very deeply. Root causes, complex thinking, but how do I make it practical, everyday, meaningful, in a real life sense with what people have got to do? That to me is what you've gone and done.
Well, I would agree with that. I feel I've on that journey. Ultimately, is a term that you've used in our conversation. Business modeling and helping people think through where opportunities are and to learn the science of innovation. Their business modeling has a very specific meaning as it relates to any kind of business. And when you think about modeling your business, it is a technique with specific skill sets and tools, generally based on the principles of jobs to be done, which Tony Ulwick and Clayton Christensen came up with when they were at Harvard. And now that's part of the entrepreneurial skills at Stanford and Harvard and the School of Design and Business Entrepreneurship. They're using those innovation models to help people think about what are the different ways to be successful when bringing something to the marketplace.
Yeah.
And so if you think about that as a differentiator, behavioral economics and emotional intelligence having that as a differentiator. And if you combine that with the fact that advisors have to find a new value promise to the marketplace, and how do they operationalize that? The best way, obviously, in my opinion, is through financial DNA and its tool set. But if you can think about changing the advisor's orientation, which is really hard to do because I've been trying for the last 6 years, to get them to stop thinking about this is what I do, and this is how I do it, and this is what I charge for it. So who can I go sell it to? To get them to think upside down, to think about what is it that the client's trying to get done? And then if I understand that correctly, then how can I identify those clients that have those things that need to be done that I've identified? And is that marketplace big enough for me to serve? And if it is, what are the ways that they're getting that done now? And are there ways that I can improve that? And if I can, is that something that they'd be willing to buy from me? So it's flipping the orientation from this is what I have to sell to the world to this is what I can create based on what I understand people need. And it's a whole lot easier to build things that people want than to make people want things. And so this whole strategy around the design schools for business entrepreneurs and rethinking how do I craft my business and what is it that I need to put into it that will help me be successful is another place that I've gone in terms of creating workshops. And those workshops have resulted in advisors completely throwing out their old business models and building really brand new and interesting things that are very focused on what the client's trying to accomplish. That jobs to be done theory and approach to creating products and service sets has led to some really innovative advisor practices out there. And I'll tell you this, in every one of them, they are using financial DNA and emotional intelligence as a way to operationalize the difference that they're talking about in terms of working with the clients. It is the value that they're bringing, and it's really, really powerful.
And Bill, as we wrap up our conversation today and sort of just focus on your identity, and I think it's been coming out, but to me, the word that's come out the most today is emotional intelligence and how we bring that to the advisors. And it just seems that, you're an innovator of EQ solutions, full stop. You could do it in any industry to help, whether it's financial advisors or professionals transform their businesses. That seems to me would be what I'm hearing as the big impact of what you're doing and what you love to do.
Well, it is. At my age now, I'm at a place where, I'm not trying to build an empire. I'm not trying to I've made my place in the world, and I've accumulated really interesting ways to think about how the world works and how to address challenges and to think about the consequences of what it is that you're trying to do. And it really all boils down to recognizing that relationships are, in fact, the most important thing that we have in life. And they really drive everything else. And if you can have a whole set of really great relationships, how powerful would that be for anybody in terms of their life and the quality of life that they have, let alone the impact that they can make on the world?
Yeah, I said this as we wrap up, and I think this is really the big tip for everybody. I said this, what you just said to somebody else this afternoon, who is a really good relationship connector of people. That's where his life is and what he does in his business, and why he's been successful. But the quality of your relationships determines the quality of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And really, the quality of your relationships determines the quality of your business.
No question.
And that's what That's the message that advisors need to take away. And how do you do that? Emotional intelligence, understanding the differences. And I think where you are is helping them see that the big problems in their business, if there are going to come back down to emotional intelligence.
It is the platform for substantial change in someone's personal life as well as their business life. And I just have to say thank you for your influence on me for these many years, because you've helped me understand so much about all of the things that are related around financial DNA and business DNA, and more importantly, the way that people can deploy the tool so they don't have to become, a counselor. They don't have to become a psychiatrist. They can take and start at a much different place and accelerate their impact on people in a much more powerful way. And that's fantastic.
Well, Bill, you've also had, these things are mutual. You've had a big impact on me in getting me to innovate, to get more creative at how we get this out there. So, and I hope there's a lot more of this to come.
Well, I appreciate you having an interest in visiting with me, and I hope that your audience enjoyed our time together.